Alright, so today we are actually going to talk about what to do when an appraisal comes back low when you're looking to purchase a house or sell a house. So I'm going to use the example from basically somebody buying a house, so representing a buyer here. And let's just go back to the beginning. Basically, you don't have to worry about an appraisal until you're actually under contract. So what happens is you make an offer, it gets accepted by the seller. Your realtor or real estate agent is going to submit all the documents to the lender, and then the lender is going to order an appraisal. And an appraisal basically is an opinion of value from an independent third party. And even though you are the one that pays for it, usually costs between $500 to almost $700 or so. Sometimes it could be more depending on the loan product that you're using. But basically, even though you're the one that's paying for it, it's owned by the bank. It's owned by the lender. And the reason why they always order an appraisal is because they are giving you a loan and they want to make sure that they're protecting their asset, because they don't want to loan you, $300,000 when a property is only worth $250,000, because heaven forbid you lose your job or you can't make payments on it anymore. They're going to have to foreclose on that property, and then they're going to have to try to sell it, and unfortunately they'll be selling it at a loss then, because it's not worth that $300,000. So that's why they have an appraiser come out to give their opinion of value. So the first step, if an appraisal does come in low, is to have your realtor look for any discrepancies in the appraisal report. So I'm not necessarily talking about comps. So the appraiser should be using similar comparable properties that the listing agent used when they were listing the property for sale. And that's based on location, so distance from that property, square footage. It's usually plus or minus like 10%. If it has similar bedrooms, bathrooms, acreage, amenities, different things like that, how updated it is, the appraiser will take all of that into consideration. So what I'm talking about for the discrepancies is, did the appraiser mark off that there's only 1,500 square feet when there's actually 1,650, or when there's some sort of difference that would work out in your favor? Make sure that your agent is looking for that. The second thing that you would want to do, if there aren't any errors there, is reach out to your lender and see what you can actually afford to do. So for example, before you and your agent start negotiating with the listing agent and the seller, you don't want to say, okay, hey, we'll give you $5,000 above the appraised amount, or $10,000, or whatever the amount is, if you can't then afford to pay closing costs, because that anything above the appraisal amount or the appraised amount is coming out of pocket, and it's not actually included for your down payment or anything like that. So those are the first two things that I would do. After that, you basically have three options, and if you can't come to an agreement from there, unfortunately you're going to have to walk away from the property. So your three options are basically as follows. Option one, the seller will come down and they'll sell you the property at the appraised value. Option two is you bring up basically the entire amount to make up that appraised value gap from what you originally made your purchase price offer at. So for example, say it's appraised at $275,000, but you and the seller went under contract at $300,000. Is the seller going to drop the purchase price to $275,000, or are you going to keep the purchase price at $300,000, but that means you have $25,000 to bring out of pocket, plus your down payment and all of your other closing costs? So that's where it can be a little tricky. Or option 3, which is probably the most common, is some sort of compromise. Whether you split it 50-50 or whether you're doing some other sort of agreement, depends on your situation, the seller's situation, and then the negotiation skills of the two agents involved. So basically, with that, I mean, it really does depend on the situation. So if it's a seller's market, the property went under contract, within a week, had multiple offers, and they were all strong offers, you're probably not going to have nearly as much negotiation room, because the seller could say, okay, well, I'll just put it back on the market and find somebody who's willing to make up some sort of appraisal difference then. If it's a buyer's market and say the property's been on the market for 60 days, maybe circumstances are changing then, you're the only offer. You could say, hey, I'm not willing to come up and pay above the appraised value. Can you bring the purchase price down? So in that case, it would suck for the seller, but I mean, because they probably had the expectation, oh, I have all this extra money now, this is what we went under contract for. But unfortunately, they don't have any other choices, because you were the only buyer, and if you're not willing to come up, then they might be sitting on an extra mortgage payment for another 2 months, or whatever the case may be, plus utilities. Their holding costs are actually going to slow them down and might play a factor. So definitely different scenarios there. Or again, you could always split the difference and say, we spoke with our lender, we're able to bring up the purchase price, or bring an extra $5,000 out of pocket, but that means you have to reduce the purchase price by $20,000. So it all just depends on what you're looking at. Obviously, you got to that point, so you as the buyer are probably interested in purchasing the property. Obviously, the seller has listed it and they want to sell the property. So the best approach is not to make the buyer or the seller the enemy. Is to say, hey, how can we work this out where it works out for both parties? And sometimes the seller needs to sell at a certain price. Sometimes the buyer can't go and bring extra money out of pocket. So it is what it is. And at that point, you would have to sign a mutual release and unfortunately walk away from the deal. But I do get that question a lot, as far as what happens if the appraisal comes back low, and those are your options. Have a great day. Bye.